Overcoming some technical difficulties. I'm Jim LaPierre. This is Sober Now, and thank goodness I have a sense of humor to get me through the day. I make plans, the universe laughs. So today we're running a few minutes late. Thank you for your patience. But what we're talking about today is pretty controversial. Today's topic is, can marijuana be part of your recovery? And I want to recognize first and foremost that this is controversial. And my preference is to focus on what unites us and never on what divides us. I know that folks have a lot of strong feelings. As soon as I posted this morning that I was going to be going live on this topic today, my messenger inbox blew up. I had a bunch of folks post on my wall and indicate their support or their opposition to the idea that marijuana can be part of recovery. My personal stance as an ally is that I honor all pathways to recovery, and I want to support a person in anything that makes their life healthier, whether that's harm reduction or medicated assisted treatment or anything. I know that for a lot of my friends in 12-step programs, that abstinence is always the goal. But I support that, of course. I am biased in favor of 12-step programs, but I'm also biased in favor of things that help to save lives. And I also, I guess the way I usually explain it to folks is that it never occurred to me to judge anybody's addiction. So given that, why in the world would I judge their recovery? Whatever works for a person, whatever helps you to get healthier, is something that I'm going to support. So, as always, I would love to hear your comments, your questions, your experience, strength, and hope. What's working for you? What do you think about this topic? I think it's interesting to consider marijuana as potentially a medicated assisted treatment, and that's been something that's been evolving as medical marijuana has been approved by more and more states, and there's some recognition that it is beneficial for the treatment of physical pain, for anxiety, for a number of different mental health conditions. It is simply good medicine. I put myself outside of the norm of most professionals who work with substance use disorder by simply saying that I support marijuana use by adults. Certainly, there is a progressive amount of research that shows that use of marijuana by a person under the age of 21 certainly has some negative impact on cognitive development. And so, while I don't judge adolescents for using marijuana, I also am not a proponent of it. I say, just like every other substance, let's wait and make that decision in our adult lives. The question that I'm often asked by individuals who are in early recovery is, can I use marijuana safely? And my question to them, and what I call for, is rigorous honesty. And I'll simply ask, does using marijuana make you want to drink? Does it make you crave another substance? Does it lead to unhealthy choices? Because if any of those things are true, then obviously it doesn't fit well into your recovery program. If it's something that causes you to crave another substance or brings you back to your drug of choice, then it can't be an issue. There's a story that I like to tell sometimes. A young man, very near and dear to my heart, was just fresh out of rehab and was in that emotionally raw place where he was looking for an argument. You ever find yourself walking around hoping that somebody gives you a reason to go off? And it's really frustrating when nobody gives you a reason. So whenever I see that in a person, I try to give them the reason and that opportunity to have a little bit of release. And so his topic, he wanted to debate with me whether or not he could use marijuana. He fully expected, because of what I do professionally, that I would say no. And so I obliged him. I said, you absolutely cannot use marijuana. And he had a very well researched, well thought out series of reasons why It was in his best interest to do so, medicinally, physiologically, mentally. And I just kept saying, no, you can't. And I let that reach a pretty big climax where he was visibly angry and shaking, and he demanded to know why did I keep insisting that he couldn't smoke pot. And when he just couldn't stand it one more second, I said, because you're broke as fuck and you don't have any friends and you're kind of being an asshole, so I don't think anybody's going to be giving you some free weed anytime soon. So that's just a fun moment in my life where I just enjoy messing with people. In terms of using marijuana, I'll often ask people to delineate the difference between medicating, getting high, and getting stoned. Uh, I think that's a pretty slippery slope for most of us. I think any of us who have an addictive brain, your brain says, I need more and more and more. And so I still don't judge this, but what I notice is that when folks are self medicating in a way that is manageable and healthy, which very few substances have that capacity or that opportunity, what they're doing is, for example, taking the edge off of anxiety, taking the edge off of debilitating or chronic pain from something like multiple sclerosis or fibromyalgia or any number of other painful conditions that folks live with, and then they're able to go on about their day. When folks are getting high, obviously, um, not a step towards health, but still something I don't want to judge. And when they're at the point of getting stoned, then I still don't want to judge it, but I'm going to say, okay, let's look at what your lifestyle is like when you're in that space. Let's look at how productive you are. How well are you managing your responsibilities when it comes to your children, when it comes to your partner, when it comes to your job, and just basic day to day life responsibilities. So, those are just a few of the things that I want to draw attention to. I've noticed a trend in all the years that I've been working as a therapist, which is that progressively, professionals in my field are increasingly rigid in their view of marijuana. Unfortunately, they cling to a number of antiquated ideas, like the idea that marijuana is a gateway drug. That's absolute bullshit. Research has shown us for a lot of years that alcohol is far more of a gateway drug, nicotine is far more of a gateway drug, and there's even some research out there saying that the use of sugar, carbohydrates, distinctly unhealthy eating, or learning to cope with food is actually what becomes a gateway to other substances. I don't really consider substance as a gateway. I think about experience as a gateway. So I'm concerned with folks like me who have survived trauma, folks who have survived childhood abuse and neglect. And I think to anyone who really understands addiction, noticing that trauma and mental illness and lived experience are what lead us into addiction as a way to cope, as a way to relieve pain, as a way to numb. I think all of that's pretty straightforward. But for a person who doesn't have experience with marijuana and they're working in the field professionally, oftentimes they just view it as taboo, view it as something that simply can't happen. And there's a lot of influences in the world that affect how we see these things. When the Drug Enforcement Agency of the U.S. government, the DEA, scheduled marijuana as a Class 1 substance, put it in the same category as heroin and a whole lot of heavy-hitting drugs, that influences how professionals think about these things. The research, I always want to say to folks, trace back who's funding this stuff, trace back where these ideas are coming from, because unfortunately a great deal of it is about money. Uh, One of the biggest reasons why I'm not concerned about marijuana use is I always look at kind of worst case scenario. So what's the worst thing that can happen? If a person uses marijuana but doesn't use other drugs, Worst case scenario, in my experience, they usually live like in their mom's basement. Maybe they deliver pizza for a living, and they play too much Xbox and watch too much porn. Like, I think that's worst case scenario, assuming that they don't go on to use other substances or develop behavioral addictions. And in the grand scheme of things, if that's what somebody wants to do with their life, then far be it from me to judge them. What I also know is that a lot of folks like me, honestly, are slackers. We're afraid. We're people who are afraid of our potential. We're people who sometimes claim that we're afraid of adulting or taking on real world responsibilities. And so the escapism of getting high or getting stoned is all the more appealing. Um, I mean, I get it, but I think what's more important is let's look at the lifestyle that we're living. Let's look at what's in our life that's healthy and unhealthy, and let's adjust according to what's needed. Thank you to folks who have written in already. Aubrey, many of my women started with marijuana. They say something like, well, when I was 14, I started smoking weed and then graduated to this and that. What do you think about it opening the door to other drugs? Well, as I said, alcohol is far more of a gateway drug than marijuana is. We know uh, every bit of research plays this out. People typically will use alcohol long before they use marijuana, and quite often they'll use nicotine long before they use marijuana. So if we're going to say that something is a gateway drug, alcohol, hands down, no question, completely legal after age 21, ruins more lives than any other drug in existence, and yet is not only socially acceptable, it's socially expected. I frequently, when I'm socializing, have to explain to people why it is that I don't drink. What's kind of fun and just funny to me is I look like somebody that smokes a lot of marijuana. I look like a guy that's got 3 pounds of it in the trunk of his car. But the funny thing is, I don't. I've just never enjoyed it. I tried very hard to enjoy it in my youth. That was a lot of years ago. And so when I work with young people today, I mean, I am amazed at how much marijuana has evolved. When I was a teenager, we certainly didn't have things with crystals on them or weed that was purple. That's really weirded me out the first time I tried it. And to be honest, I tried pretty hard to like it in its modern day incantations, and I just don't. I don't enjoy it. It makes me tired, which is not great for me. It makes me feel kind of dumb. It makes me feel like I am really hungry and want to get to the fridge, but it also makes me feel like I weigh about 500 pounds and can't possibly get there. So that's just me. But technology problems again. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Crystal, thank you for weighing in. I completely agree with you. Trauma is the gateway experience, not a single substance. Tess, thank you for writing in. I appreciate that very much. Robin, I appreciate your comment. A risk of psychosis in the family experience. There is a growing amount of research that links onset of psychosis with marijuana. What is most frequently occurring there is that a person already has an organic illness that will result in psychosis coded into their DNA. So, for most people, if they experience psychosis, they live with schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder with psychotic features, a fairly narrow range of mental illness. Is it possible that use of marijuana increases the onset of that symptomology and of that disease? I think that's absolutely possible and very concerning. Um, does a neurotypical person use marijuana and become psychotic? Absolutely not. And again, there's a lot more for us to discern and to learn about this. My hope is to cultivate a conversation in which we're viewing recovery and specifically medication assisted therapy as things that we can be inclusive about and respectful of. We can recognize that not only is trauma the gateway experience for addiction, but that what we experience individually and collectively as adversity and as trauma also has an enormous impact on substance use disorder. We saw that very vividly through the course of 2020 in response to the pandemic, in response to social isolation, in response to less availability of services. The number of overdose deaths skyrocketed exponentially this year. For 2020, we're going to be up about 30% nationwide. Here in Maine, the final numbers, to my knowledge, haven't come out, but they're estimated at over 500 deaths. And that's an all-time high for us. I think so much of what we're concerned about in terms of marijuana is in response to it being legalized medicinally and recreationally increasingly. My hope is that we follow the lead of other countries who have decriminalized substances and experience benefit uniformly from that. But that's kind of the direction I want to take this in, but I, of course, am totally open to your questions and comments. Avery, thanks for writing in. What are some questions providers can ask to explore medicating versus getting high versus getting stoned? I'm sure each person's definition is different. I totally agree. What I want to know about with the person that I'm providing, whether it's somebody that I'm seeing as a therapist or working with as a coach, I want to get a sense of what their baseline is. So most days, I mean, we have good days and bad, but for the most part, we stay in a particular range. And so I want to know, what are the things that a person struggles with holistically? What do they struggle with in terms of their mental health? What are they struggling with in terms of medical conditions or their physiological state? And so what is it that the use of a substance is designed to do? So for folks who live with chronic pain, my heart goes out to them. Any chronic condition, particularly one that impacts a person's ability to function physically and neurologically, is important to consider. Some of the advice that I give to families when they have a child who legitimately lives with attention deficit disorder is whatever medication options you want to explore. I'm neutral about medication in most cases. If it helps you, great. If it doesn't, okay, let's find ways to modify it. But when it comes specifically to attention deficit disorder, the person who lives with that condition is extraordinarily likely to be drawn to marijuana, specifically because it's the first time in their life that they feel their brain has slowed down enough that they can be organized and focused. When we treat ADD medicinally, it's usually with psychostimulants. Vyvanse and Concerta are kind of the go-tos, but Adderall and Ritalin and others are still around. And so for a kid with ADD, it seems counterintuitive. What you have is somebody whose mind is going too fast and their body's moving too fast, and we give them speed. But based on what's called the paradoxical effect, it actually slows them down. Same kiddo using marijuana, it slows us down. Does it promote focus? It does. It certainly seems to for an awful lot of us. But I think the biggest piece that I want to talk about with people is whether or not they have a trauma history and whether or not they live with PTSD. And unfortunately, there does not exist a medication that is specifically designated for people who live with post-traumatic stress disorder. It doesn't exist. PTSD is a condition that within the DSM is categorized with anxiety disorders, and anxiety occurs in many different forms. Generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia, and PTSD are the most common forms of anxiety. And the go-tos medicinally for a person who really has impaired functioning from those are benzodiazepines. which are highly addictive and easily abused. They have terrible effects when mixed with alcohol or other drugs. And the person who uses them 100% of the time will become chemically dependent on that substance. So, in my experience, and I am not medically trained, I am not here to tell you what meds you should or shouldn't take. I will say that for folks that live with PTSD, marijuana is what my clients over 20 years have told me is the most effective medicine for that. And I believe it. The biggest part, hardest part about differentiating being high versus being stoned versus self-medicating is that it hinges on the degree to which a person is rigorously honest with themselves. Because if you have an addictive brain, your brain's going to tell you that you're in more pain than perhaps you are. Your brain's going to tell you that you need more than you perhaps do. And particularly when it comes to the use of things like edibles, uh, we are impatient people. And so I think a lot of us have had negative experiences where we just keep eating or drinking more of the substance that has THC in it because we're waiting for an effect, which usually lands about 30 or 40 minutes later. And then we're a little blown away by the effects of having taken in too much of the substance. Let's see. Thank you. Shirley, I appreciate you. For pain management, it seems better than a pill from what I've seen. Yeah, I mean, everybody's different. And it saddens me that for most of our country that opioids are completely legal as long as they're prescribed, but marijuana in many states is still illegal. In terms of the impact on the body, the impact on the mind, the potential risk and rewards of continued use, um, it's really a no-brainer. Just checking through a lot of comments today. It's really cool to hear from you all. I should pick more controversial subjects more often. We'll get folks chiming in. Would love to hear your experience, strength, and hope. I guess the next point that I really want to focus on is I've served an awful lot of people who have benefited from different types of treatment and specifically benefited from 12-step programs who oftentimes feel ashamed because they're using marijuana medicinally and their particular program says that that's not recovery or their sponsor, their social circle says that that's not recovery as it's defined in their literature. And I respect that idea, but I also know that so much is open to interpretation. I respect and have learned an enormous amount from 12-step literature, but I also know that mood altering substances are psychotropics. They include things like antidepressants that I don't think any right thinking person objects to. If I'm taking Prozac, Paxil, Lexapro, Celexa, Wellbutrin, Zoloft, does that mean I'm not in recovery? I don't think so. I think it's pretty clear cut that I'm using something to treat a mental illness that improves my functioning and helps me to get through a day. And I view marijuana exactly the same way. Um, Ron, thanks for writing in. I've been able to diminish PTSD symptoms substance 3 through 12 steps in therapy because I understand that not a single feeling has ever killed me. I learned to observe my feelings so they don't hit me like a freight train. However, people do it differently. I really appreciate you, Ron. I agree completely that there's enormous benefit to 12-step fellowships. It should never be compared to anything else. I don't think it can be compared to anything else. And what I appreciate about 12-step programs is that they provide fellowship and connection to like-minded people who are on similar journeys. Some of us are further along than others. We get to learn from each other and we get to share experience, strength, and hope. I love the expression that feelings are not facts. I absolutely know that feelings, even when they're overwhelming, will not kill us. The distinction that I'm usually concerned with is the degree to which they impair our ability to function, our ability to live our lives. So while feelings may be overwhelming, and we can talk about 100 different ways to manage emotion, what is overwhelming, flashbacks, nightmares, night terrors, and sometimes intrusive thoughts. Um, the person who lives with post-traumatic stress disorder does not simply remember events or have feelings about them, they relive those experiences. And so my concern is the stability and safety and security of that individual is very much impaired. And so if there is something that is beneficial to them, that is not addictive in nature, not destructive in nature, that helps to improve their clarity, their functioning, their mental capacity, then I support it. But I never want to, whether it's marijuana or any other topic, I never want to have a black and white discussion like it's either this or it's that. We should be doing this and not that. I always want to say, how about we do both? Like, how about if I do therapy and I do a 12-step program and I do a church community if that works for me, and I exercise and 100 other things. It's never just one thing that allows us to achieve the life that we want. It's 100 things. Chris, thanks for writing in. Coming off a diazepam addiction can be brutal. Opioid addiction, marijuana is so much more benign than pharmaceuticals for a wide range of issues. Marijuana needs to be removed from the scheduled drug list. I completely agree. Uh, and it should never have been prohibited in the first place. I agree with that. I know that for natives and for a lot of other cultures, marijuana has just been good medicine for hundreds of years. I'm very concerned about the use of benzodiazepines and opioids specifically. I also celebrate the work of organizations like my friends at Greener Pastures Recovery, who increasingly are using marijuana and oils distilled from marijuana specifically to treat withdrawal symptoms from opioids and opiates. And I think that is pretty amazing. I think progressively we see that there's a lot of utility in hemp, in marijuana, and different products that can be raised from it. And so I I see opportunity in all of that. Let's see. Lauren, thank you for writing in. How many times? I'm not sure what your question is. Can you help me out just a little bit? How many times what? Oh, thank you. I have to scroll up a minute. I'm out of pots, so I'm terrified I'm going to slip up and start using again. I can't tell people how many times I've heard this from people in recovery. Okay. Um, yeah, that's rough. Okay. If what I'm using is one thing and the only thing that helps me to feel safe, helps me to feel like I'm in control of my life, um, that's not ever going to work. It's not ever going to be enough. I need to have a whole lot of things in my life that keep me from using, that help me to move away from self-destruction. And if pot is the only thing that's working right now, I understand that. But I also know that I have a responsibility to find more and more things that work for me, and specifically connections to people who can hold me accountable, people who actively support me, but also call me out on my shit. So when it comes to whether it's addiction to alcohol, benzos, stimulants, or opioids, we have to be willing to go to any lengths. So if somebody is using marijuana medicinally, it really helps them, and they're broke financially, or they don't have access to marijuana. I understand that. Would it, potentially be something that puts you at risk for relapse? Absolutely. Should you have a relapse prevention plan in place and a lot of supports to help you do whatever it takes to not use? Absolutely. Shirley, thanks for writing in. I'd never try to talk about this at a meeting. Too many opinions and judgment, so it's hard to be honest about medication use. Feelings of guilt can keep us away from the meetings. That's absolutely true. And I honestly, that's one of the biggest points that prompted me to want to talk about this today. I serve an awful lot of people who use marijuana very responsibly, use it medicinally. They're people who are gainfully employed, taking care of their families, doing all the right things, working steps, and they're just not going to acknowledge publicly or even in the context of a meeting that they happen to use marijuana because specifically they're afraid of being judged, they're afraid of being ostracized or being treated poorly by virtue of their use. So, again, I'm going to be wrapping up momentarily, but my goal is to focus on what unites us and not what divides us. I love people in recovery, I love people in active addiction, and either way, I want to help people get to a healthier, more manageable place. Frankly, I'm a proponent of anything that helps a person not die. And while I have nothing but love for 12-step programs, I recognize that it is a controversial topic. Frankly, I think it's something that will progressively change. I remember when methadone first became widely used, it was controversial. It sometimes still is. Suboxone was controversial, sometimes still is. Subutex, Vivitrol, every medication that Big Pharma has come out with that helps a person move away from chemical dependency and the life of active addiction. Marijuana is just the latest thing to be controversial. Um, I understand that. I appreciate that. I want to accept wherever a person's at today. I want to be able to help a person not die. I want to help them transform their lives. I'm biased in my belief that 12-step programs are ultimately the best guide available for how to transform your life. And so, whatever your struggle is today, whatever it is that you're using for a substance, please know that there are lots of us out here who care about you. I don't just love people in recovery, I love people in active addiction. And I want to be helpful to you. So, please connect with me. Jim at sobernow.com is the easiest way. I'd love to answer your questions, love to hear about topics that you'd like to see covered in future streams. Would love to have you head over to Sober Now on Facebook and give that page a quick like. You'll get notifications for weekly events and new content that we're adding. Would love to have you check out Sober Now's YouTube channel. Well over 100 videos there now on different aspects of recovery and completely free. And would love to have you check out the site, sobernow.com. Home study programs, completely confidential, absolute anonymity, and super low cost, under $15 for a monthly subscription. So please join in, please connect with me. I will look forward to talking to you after a short break, and please take excellent care of yourselves. God bless.